Red Hollow did not look like the kind of place where anything important happened. That was the lie it told best. In the morning light, the town appeared calm, almost forgiving. False front buildings leaned forward slightly, as if listening rather than judging. Dust lay flat and pale in the street, pressed hard by years of wagon wheels and hooves, hiding whatever stains had once darkened it. From a distance, Red Hollow looked like a place a man could pass through and forget. People who stayed longer learned otherwise. Red Hollow didn't shout. It didn't chase. It watched. It remembered who arrived together and who left alone. It remembered which women walked without escort and which men pretended not to notice them. It remembered where people sat, how close they sat, and what they did with their hands. The town kept its records quietly, not on paper, but in shared memory. Near the hitching rail, where the road widened enough for wagons to turn without backing into trouble, someone had stacked a hay bale weeks earlier and never bothered to move it. The straw had faded under the sun, bleached almost white. Wind worried loose strands free and carried them down the street like thoughts no one wanted to claim. That was where Clara Wynn sat. She sat carefully, as though the ground itself might object to her weight. Her back was straight, deliberate. The posture of someone who had learned that how you held yourself mattered to people looking for reasons. Her knees were together, ankles crossed, boots placed neatly despite their cracked soles. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers interlaced tight enough that her knuckles had gone pale. Not clasped in prayer, not loose with comfort. Held. The blue dress she wore was plain cotton, mended and pressed by hand. It wasn't new. It wasn't fashionable. But it was clean. She had scrubbed it that morning behind a cabin, kneeling in frost-bitten grass beside a dented tin basin, working the fabric until her fingers burned. Clean mattered. Clean meant she still controlled something. Beside her sat Jonah Pike. He had taken off his hat before sitting and placed it on his knee rather than on the hay between them. A small, polite thing, almost invisible unless you were trained to notice what men did with their hands. But it mattered. Jonah Pike had learned that small choices were the ones that followed you. Big ones announced themselves with noise and blood. Small ones whispered and waited. He sat with his shoulders slightly forward, elbows on his thighs, boots planted in the dirt. Ready in a quiet way. He did not lean toward Clara. He did not lean away. He occupied his space with care. They did not look at each other. Not because they didn't want to, because looking would tip the moment into something easier to explain, something Red Hollow could judge and file away. Looking could turn restraint into temptation, and temptation into a story that swallowed women whole. So they looked at the street instead. A wagon creaked past, iron rims clicking against stone. A horse stamped and snorted at flies. Somewhere behind the hotel, a woman laughed. Sharp, practiced, already tired of pretending it meant joy. Life continued, and Red Hollow watched. The road behind her. The night before still lived in Clara's bones. She had been walking for days. 3, maybe 4. Time blurred when hunger gnawed, and the wind never stopped speaking. The plains did not offer mercy. They offered distance, and distance was a test. Few people passed willingly. Her boots had split along the soles, leather peeling back to expose raw stitching. Her left heel had blistered, burst, hardened with dried blood that glued sock to skin. Every step sent pain up her leg like a warning. When she stumbled, the ground did not soften. It waited. The wind hunted her. It scraped grit into her mouth, into her eyes, into the seams of her clothing. It didn't howl. It whispered, persistent and cold, promising that if she stopped, it would finish what exhaustion had started. Crying wasted warmth. Stopping wasted everything. She did not remember deciding to knock on Jonah Pike's door. She remembered smoke first, a thin ribbon rising against the sky. Then firelight. Then the shape of a cabin emerging from the dark. Jonah opened the door with a rifle in his hand, and caution carved into his face. He looked past her first, scanning the horizon for shapes that didn't belong. Only then did he look at her. Not at her body, at her condition. "Come in," he said. Not "why are you here?" Not "what do you want?" Just "come in." The warmth nearly dropped her to her knees. Inside, the cabin was spare and clean. Everything had a purpose, nothing decorative. Jonah gave her stew and water and told her to eat slowly. She didn't. When desperation and habit tangled together, and she offered herself in exchange for staying, his refusal cut clean through the script she had learned by heart. Not here. The words landed heavier than any bargain she had ever made. Later, when the riders came, 3 at first, then more, Jonah did not bargain. He did not shout. He stood. The gunfire was brief, brutal, final. Clara remembered Jonah in the flare of muzzle light, not angry, not eager. Focused, like a man who had already decided what he would not let happen again. When it was over, when the snow hissed around fallen bodies and the survivors fled, Jonah said something that lodged itself deep in her chest. No one gets to decide what you owe but you. The hay bale. The moment. Now, in daylight, sitting in the open where anyone could see, those words felt heavier. Clara shifted slightly on the straw. The movement was small, almost nothing, but Jonah noticed. "You don't have to stay," he said quietly. He didn't look at her. She stared at the dirt street, at the faint wagon tracks that would be erased by evening. "I know," she said. Across the street, 2 men lingered near the saloon doors, pretending to argue about nothing. Their eyes drifted back again and again. Red Hollow loved deciding what things meant. "I don't want people thinking," Clara began. "They will," Jonah said gently. She glanced at him. He still wasn't looking at her. "They always do," he added. "Might as well make them work for it." That almost made her smile. Almost. Jonah's hand rested on his knee, fingers relaxed. Clara noticed the space between that hand and her leg, and how easily that space could disappear. Her body tensed, Not because she expected cruelty, but because disappointment had been more reliable than kindness her entire life. Jonah noticed. Without comment, he moved his hand away. Not abruptly, not apologetically, just enough. The choice landed between them like a stone dropped into still water. Clara exhaled. "Why?" she asked. Jonah frowned slightly. "Why what? Why stop?" He turned his head just enough to see her from the corner of his eye. "You think I don't want to?" he asked quietly. The honesty startled her. "I think," Clara said carefully, "most men don't stop themselves." Jonah looked down at his hat, thumb tracing the worn brim. "I've been most men," he said. Nothing happened. And in a world built on taking, that restraint rang louder than any gunshot. Jonah Pike before. Her Jonah. Pike never claimed to be a good man. He had once ridden with men who believed the world was something you took before it took you. Men who laughed easily and slept poorly. Men who called themselves free because no one had stopped them yet. Jonah learned fast. How to ride hard. How to shoot straight. How to ignore things that should have mattered. Ignoring became easier with practice. The night that broke him arrived quietly. A job gone wrong. A man with a knife. A woman who screamed. Jonah stood there and did nothing. Not because he approved, but because stepping in felt complicated. The scar on his face was the smallest consequence. He left soon after. Bought land far from anywhere worth remembering. Built a cabin with his own hands, and told himself isolation was penance. It wasn't. Isolation was hiding. Then Clara knocked on his door. Standing between her and the men chasing her didn't make him a hero. It made him responsible. Daylight consequences. They came 2 days later. Men from the river town rode in under the excuse of business. They asked questions softly. They watched Clara too closely. Red Hollow watched them too. This time, Jonah didn't step in front of Clara. He stood beside her. "I'm not going back," Clara said. The men laughed, but the sound lacked confidence. Red Hollow listened. The story had changed. The men left. Not because they were afraid. Because daylight made everything visible. What remained, people remembered that hay bale differently. Some swore Jonah touched her knee. Others insisted she leaned into him. Stories filled the space where nothing happened. Clara learned to live with that, because she knew the truth. She knew the moment Jonah stopped himself. She knew the weight of that choice. Sometimes, at dusk, they sat there again. Still not touching, still choosing. And in a world that took everything it could, that choice became the most defiant thing either of them ever did. The town tests them. Red Hollow did not accept change quietly. A week after the men rode away, a different kind of attention settled in. Less obvious, more patient. Mrs. Calder, who ran the dry goods store and knew everything before it was officially known, began asking questions that weren't really questions. "How long is she staying with you?" she asked Jonah one afternoon. Voice light, eyes sharp. "As long as she wants," Jonah replied. That answer traveled faster than a lie ever could. Men began offering help Jonah hadn't asked for. Fence repairs, extra hands, advice he didn't need. It was the town's way of circling something it didn't understand, pretending friendliness while measuring threat. Clara felt it too. Women who had once nodded politely now studied her more closely, some with curiosity. some with something sharper, a few with something like hope, though they would never name it that way. One afternoon, while Clara waited outside the general store with a sack of flour at her feet, a younger woman approached her. Barely more than a girl, dirt under her nails, and fear behind her eyes. "How did you do it?" the girl asked quietly. Clara frowned. "Do what?" "Sit there," the girl said, nodding toward the hitching rail. "Like that, without it turning into something else." Clara considered her answer. "I didn't do anything," she said finally. "I just didn't let anyone else decide for me." The girl absorbed that like a secret, too dangerous to repeat. Jonah's past does not stay buried. Jonah had known it would catch up to him. It came in the form of Ezra Cole, lean, sharp-eyed, with a voice that carried memory like a weapon. Ezra rode into Red Hollow alone, which was the first sign he wasn't just passing through. Jonah recognized him before the man spoke. Ezra had ridden with the same group once, not for long enough. They met outside the saloon at dusk. Clara watched from across the street, her stomach tightening in a way she hadn't felt since the road. "You always were good at disappearing," Ezra said. Jonah didn't deny it. "I hear you stood your ground," Ezra continued. "Shot some men over a woman." Jonah's jaw tightened. "I stood my ground," he said. "The rest is your imagination." Ezra smiled thinly. "That's not what they're saying downriver." Jonah stepped closer, voice low. "You here to repeat stories or start one?" Ezra studied him. "I'm here to see which man you are now," he said. "The one who rode away, or the one who finally decided to stand still." Ezra left the next morning, but Jonah knew better than to believe that was the end of it. Clara chooses again. That night, Clara found Jonah sitting outside the cabin, staring at nothing. "You're thinking too loud," she said. He didn't smile. "They won't leave it alone," he said. "My past, your presence, the way things look." Clara sat beside him, the distance between them familiar now, intentional. "Then let them look," she said. Jonah turned to her. "You don't have to stay through that." Clara met his eyes fully. "I already stayed through worse," she said. "This time I'm staying because I want to." The distinction mattered. It always had. The second hay bale. Weeks passed. The hay bale remained. People avoided it now, as if sitting there might invite questions they didn't want to answer. One evening, as the sun bled low across the horizon, Clara sat there again. Jonah joined her a moment later, hat in his hands. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The town watched. But something had shifted. Not in them, in the watching. What Red Hollow saw now was not scandal. It was refusal. Refusal to be hurried. Refusal to be claimed. Refusal to be reduced to a story that made sense to people who had never lived it. Jonah rested his forearm on his knee. Clara's dress brushed his sleeve. Still, nothing happened, and that nothing was louder than anything else in town. The next test. The next time Red Hollow tested them, it didn't do it with stares. It did it with need. Because a town can gossip forever, but it can only starve for a week before it starts looking for someone to blame. The first sign came as a rider nobody recognized. Thin horse, tired posture, coat too light for the season. He came in at midday, didn't tie up at the saloon, didn't ask for whiskey. He went straight to the telegraph office and stood there long enough for every idle eye to notice. Then he left. An hour later, Jonah was splitting wood behind his cabin when he felt it. A pressure in the air that had nothing to do with weather. Clara looked up from the wash line at the same moment. "What is it?" she asked. Jonah rested the axe head on the stump, palm on the handle. His gaze drifted to the horizon like he expected the land to produce something unpleasant if he stared long enough. "Message," he said. "How do you know?" "Because men don't go to the telegraph office unless they're sending trouble ahead," Jonah said. "Or calling it in." Clara swallowed. The wind tugged at the damp hem of her dress. "From Black Arrow," she said. Jonah didn't confirm. He didn't have to. "I thought they gave up," she said. Jonah set the axe down carefully. "Men like Cross don't give up," he said. "They just get organized." Clara felt the old instinct rise, the one that told her to prepare her face to look calm, her voice to sound grateful, her body to not anger anyone. She hated that instinct. Jonah stepped closer, stopping a respectful distance away, reminding her without saying it that distance could be chosen. "You don't have to go back in time," he said. Clara blinked. "What?" "You're standing like you're already apologizing," Jonah said. Clara's throat tightened. "I don't mean to." "I know," he said. "But you're doing it anyway." She exhaled, shakier than she wanted. "What do we do?" she asked. Jonah glanced toward Red Hollow. "We let the town show its hand," he said, "and we keep ours steady." The town's hand. Red Hollow didn't wait long. By evening, rumors moved like wind through cracks. A man at the saloon swore he'd seen a note with a seal. The general store clerk suddenly had opinions about who should and shouldn't be allowed to bring trouble into a respectable place. Respectable. Clara heard it spoken with the same tone she'd heard in Black Arrow. The tone people used when they wanted to call you dirty without getting their hands dirty. The next morning, Jonah and Clara rode into town together. Not side by side like a show, just together, like it was normal. At the hitching rail, the hay bale still sat where it always had. Clara looked at it. Jonah noticed. "You want to sit?" he asked. Clara hesitated. Part of her wanted to avoid giving the town anything to chew on. Then she remembered. The town would chew anyway. She nodded. They sat, hat on Jonah's knee, hands in Clara's lap, eyes turned. "You're doing it again," Jonah murmured. "Doing what?" she asked without moving her lips. "Thinking you need to earn the right to sit," Jonah said. Clara swallowed. "Maybe I do." Jonah's voice stayed low. "You don't." Across the street, Mrs. Calder watched from her doorway. Then Sheriff Bram Lott stepped onto the boardwalk. Sheriff Lott wasn't big. He didn't need to be. His badge looked too clean, his boots too new. He'd only been sheriff a year, and he wore it like a costume. He walked over slowly, letting his spurs announce him. Jonah didn't stand. Clara didn't either. "Jonah Pike," the sheriff said. "Didn't expect to see you planting roots." "Not planting," Jonah replied. "Just living." The sheriff's gaze shifted to Clara, like she was an item to be inventoried. "And who is this?" Clara felt the old reflex rise. Say something soft. Make it easy. She crushed it. "Clara Wynn," she said. "From where?" Jonah's eyes turned to the sheriff. Calm. Measured. "Does it matter?" Jonah asked. "In my town it does," Sheriff Lott said. "In your town," Jonah said slowly. "You sure ask a lot of questions for a man who doesn't like answers." "There's talk," the sheriff said. "There's always talk," Jonah answered. "Talk says you brought trouble. Talk says men got shot." "Talk needs something to do," Jonah said. "Folks in Red Hollow don't like trouble," the sheriff said. "Then they should stop feeding it," Jonah replied. The sheriff's eyes flicked to Clara again. "Men from downriver are looking. That kind of looking can burn a town." Clara's stomach nodded. Not fear of the men. Fear of what the town might do to stay clean. "If those men come," the sheriff said, "I expect you to handle it without spilling blood on my street." Jonah's mouth twitched. "I don't spill," he said. "I stop." Sheriff Lott stared, then stepped back. "That hay bale's public," he said as he left. "Don't forget it." When he was gone, Clara exhaled. What did he mean? "He meant the town thinks it owns anything it can see," Jonah said, "including you." Clara's hands tightened. "Let it try." Jonah's gaze flicked to her. Something warmed, just a fraction. "That's the first time you've said that like you meant it," he murmured. Clara didn't reply. Because she did. The letter that arrived too clean. The letter came that afternoon. Not by rider. Not by telegraph. By hand. A boy from the hotel brought it to Jonah at the general store like it was ordinary mail, like it wasn't a weapon folded into paper. Jonah took it without opening it. His thumb traced the seal. Dark, wax, neat imprint. He didn't need to see the name. Clara watched him from the boardwalk, flour sack in her arms. She recognized Jonah's stillness. "What is it?" she asked. Jonah didn't open it yet. "It's him." Clara's throat tightened. "Cross." Jonah broke the seal with one clean motion. He read without moving his face. When he finished, he folded the letter again. "Read it," he said, handing it to Clara. Her hands trembled slightly. Not from cold, from memory. The handwriting was neat, almost polite. It didn't say please. It didn't need to. "Clara Wynn, you have taken something that does not belong to you. My investment. Debts are debts. They don't vanish because you walk away. I will arrive in Red Hollow in 7 days with men and paperwork. I prefer paperwork. Return to me before then, and we will keep this civil. Refuse, and your protector will learn what a river town can afford to lose. Amen Cross." Clara's fingers tightened until the paper crinkled. Paperwork. How men like Cross made theft look legal. "He's coming," Clara said. Jonah nodded. 7 days. "What do we do?" We make sure the town can't pretend it's none of its business, Jonah said. How? Jonah looked at her fully, eyes dark and steady. You tell your story. Clara stared. No. You do. I don't want them deciding who I am. They already are, Jonah said. If I talk, they'll call me what they always call me. Jonah leaned closer, not into her space, into the moment. Let them, he murmured. Words don't chain you unless you agree to wear them. Clara's breath caught. Beautiful, terrifying. 7 days. If she stayed silent, the town would fill the silence with its own story, and its story would not protect her. Clara folded the letter, hands steadier now. Where do I tell it? She asked. Jonah nodded toward the saloon. The only place Red Hollow listens, he said. The saloon speech. That night, the dust-crowned saloon was full. Not festive, interested. People came because something felt like it was about to happen, and boredom is a strong hunger in small towns. Cards slapped tables, whiskey poured. Laughter rose too loud in spots, like it was trying to drown tension. Jonah and Clara entered together. The room quieted, the way rooms did when a story walked in. Clara felt the old urge to shrink. She didn't. She walked to the center of the room and stopped. Jonah stood near the wall, not like a guard, like a promise. Sheriff Lott watched from the bar. Mrs. Calder sat near the front, eyes sharp. Clara's mouth went dry. Her voice, when it came, surprised even her. My name is Clara Wynn. A murmur ran through the room. I worked at the Lucky Span in Black Arrow, she said. Upstairs. Men shifted. Some looked away quickly, as if the word upstairs dirtied their ears. Clara let that discomfort hang. I didn't start upstairs, she said. I started cleaning, washing, serving. But when my mother died, and rent came due, I learned what work pays, and what work pretends. Silence deepened. I tried to leave, she said. Eamon Cross told me I owed him money. Food I ate, a bed I slept in, protection I never asked for. He wrote it down and called it debt. A man scoffed softly, but it sounded uncertain. Clara met it with her eyes. He sent men after me, she said, not because of money, because he believes a woman is property once she's been used. A low sound rose, discomfort, anger, shame. Clara didn't soften. I walked out into the plains, she continued. I walked until my boots broke and my feet bled. I walked because I'd rather die cold than live owned. The room went still. Jonah Pike gave me shelter, she said. Not a bargain. Shelter. Heads turned toward Jonah. Jonah didn't move. And when the men came, Clara said, voice tightening. Jonah stood between them and me. They're coming again, she said. In 7 days, with paperwork, with men, with the kind of law written by whoever has more money. She paused. I am not asking this town to save me. A murmur. I am telling this town what will happen if it decides it would rather be comfortable than right. Silence. Heavy. Cross doesn't just take women, she said. He takes towns, stores with debt, ranches with liens, men who drink too much, women who trust too little. He takes whatever will let him own more tomorrow. She let it settle. If you let him take me, Clara said, quieter now, you are teaching him Red Hollow can be bought. The saloon was so still, Clara could hear the floor settle. Then Miss Calder stood. Who else did he do this to? She asked. More than I can name, Clara said. Mrs. Calder nodded once. Sheriff Lott cleared his throat. You done? Clara looked at him. Yes. Now you decide what kind of town you are. She walked out. Jonah followed. Behind them, the saloon stayed quiet, like Red Hollow was trying to decide whether it was angry, ashamed, or impressed. The night Jonah finally spoke back at the cabin, Clara sat at the table, hands around a cup of water she wasn't drinking. Jonah stood near the stove, staring into the fire like it owed him an answer. You didn't have to do that, Jonah said. Yes, Clara said softly. I did. I meant, you didn't have to do it alone. You stood beside me. I stood in the room, he said. That isn't the same. Clara studied him. Why do you talk like you're always failing? She asked. Jonah exhaled. Because I'm practiced at it. Tell me, she said. Tell you what? The thing you carry. Jonah's gaze flicked away. You don't want it. I didn't want upstairs either, Clara said. But it happened. Now I live with it. So tell me. Stop hiding behind silence like it's a virtue. Jonah stood very still. Then he sat, on the chair near the door, the chair he used like a reminder that comfort was a trap. His voice, when it came, was rough. I rode with a man named Hollis Vane. The name settled in the room like smoke. He wasn't a boss, Jonah said, but men followed him because he made them feel like wolves instead of dogs. We did jobs, protection, collections, things that sound clean until you look close. He paused, swallowing. One night we went to a ranch. The rancher owed money. Vane said we'd take horses. Jonah's hand tightened. But Vane wasn't there for horses, Jonah said quietly. He was there to remind the world he could. There was a woman, Jonah said. The rancher's wife. She came out with a shotgun, shaking so hard the barrel wobbled. She told us to leave. Vane laughed, Jonah said. He took the gun from her like she was a child. Clara's fingers curled around her cup. She slapped him, Jonah said. A tiny, brave thing. And Vane cut her, Jonah said, eyes unfocused. Not to kill, to teach, to mark. Clara's stomach turned. I stood there, Jonah said, and I did nothing. Why? Clara whispered. Because I was afraid, he said. Not of dying, of being the only one who said no. Silence filled the cabin. That night, Jonah said, voice cracking slightly, I learned the truth about myself. What truth? That when the world asked me what kind of man I was, Jonah said, I answered wrong. Clara felt something hot rise. Then answer again, she said. Jonah's brow furrowed. You moved your hand away on that hay bale, Clara said. You answered again. Jonah stared at her like a man on the edge of something he couldn't name. 7 days, Jonah said quietly. Clara nodded. 7 days. The fire cracked like punctuation. 7 days became a cage. The next days were not dramatic. That was what made them worse. Waiting made the air heavy. The town moved slower. Men spoke softer. Women watched more. Even the horses seemed restless. Jonah prepared without show. He repaired the cabin door where bullets had splintered it, checked his rifle, counted ammunition like a man counting hours, rode out to scout the road twice a day. Clara watched him and felt the old fear whisper, "This ends with blood." But beneath it lived something new, a stubborn certainty. Not that she would be saved, only that she would not be taken quietly again. One evening, as Jonah returned from scouting, Clara stood by the fence, looking out across the land. "You should leave," Jonah said as he dismounted. "No," Clara said. "Clara, no," she repeated. "You offered me choice. I'm choosing." Jonah's jaw tightened. "It won't be romantic. It'll be ugly." "It already was ugly," Clara said. "This time, I'm not alone in it." Jonah stared a long moment, then nodded. "Then we plan like you mean it," he said. He brought out the revolver, the same one he'd handed her the first night. Clara took it without trembling. "If they come," Jonah said, "they'll try to separate us first. Make it feel inevitable." Clara nodded. "So we make one thing clear," Jonah said. "Nothing about you is inevitable." Clara swallowed hard. "Teach me." And for the next 2 nights he did. Grip, breath, sightline, steadiness, not hero lessons, survival lessons, staying present even when the moment turned ugly. Clara learned quickly, not because she wanted violence, because she wanted ownership of herself. The seventh day arrived too bright. The sky was an empty blue, indifferent and clean, like the world was pretending nothing bad ever happened under it. Jonah and Clara rode into town early. Red Hollow was already awake. People stood in doorways. Men clustered near the saloon. Women gathered near the dry goods store, pretending errands. The hay bale waited like an altar. Clara looked at it as they dismounted. Jonah noticed. "You want to sit?" Clara hesitated only a second. "Yes." They sat, hat on Jonah's knee, hands in Clara's lap. The town held its breath. Then the sound came, faint at first, like memory. Hooves. Not one horse. Many. The sound grew louder, heavier, until the dust itself seemed to vibrate. A rider appeared at the far end of the street, then another, until a line of men entered Red Hollow, like a slow-moving shadow. At the center rode Amon Cross. He did not look like the kind of man who owned people. That was his trick. Clean clothes, dark coat, gloves. A face that could have belonged to a banker. A smile polite enough to be mistaken for kindness. Behind him rode 8 men, armed, calm, professional. Cross stopped near the hitching rail and dismounted slowly, as if the town were his office. He looked at Clara first, not with hunger, with possession. "Clara," he said smoothly. There you are. Clara did not stand. She did not shrink. Cross's eyes flicked to Jonah. And Jonah Pike, Cross said pleasantly. I wondered where you crawled off to. Jonah's voice was flat. You brought paperwork? Cross smiled wider, tapped his coat pocket. I brought options, Cross said. Paperwork is how civilization avoids blood. Civilization doesn't avoid blood, Jonah said. It just hires men to spill it quietly. Cross chuckled. You've always been dramatic. He stepped closer, stopping a careful distance away, performing decency for the town. I don't want this to become an embarrassment, Cross said softly. For you. For these people. You don't get to talk about embarrassment, Clara said. A murmur rippled. I am here, Cross said, still calm, to collect what is owed. I owe you nothing, Clara said. You owe me time, Cross said. You owe me money. You owe... No, Clara cut in. You stole my life and called it debt. Silence fell. Cross blinked once, the first crack, then sighed, like a man disappointed by a stubborn employee. Jonah, Cross said, we can do this clean. You hand her over. I leave. No one gets hurt. Your cabin stays standing. Jonah didn't move. She isn't yours, Jonah said. Cross's smile returned, colder. Everyone is someone's. That's the difference between you and me, Jonah said. I don't believe that. Cross looked past them to the town. You people, Cross called out. This is business, a contract, a debt. He held up a folded paper like scripture. I have legal claim, Cross said. If you interfere with law. Sheriff Lott stepped forward, swallowing. Mr. Cross, we don't want trouble. Of course you don't, Sheriff, Cross said kindly. That's why you'll do the sensible thing. Cross turned back to Clara. Stand up, he said softly. Come with me. We'll be civil. Clara did not move. Jonah did. Not forward. Just shifted. A subtle change. Like a door locking. Look around, Clara said. Cross frowned slightly. You think this is just me? Clara said louder. But it's not. You've been buying people with fear. Buying towns with paperwork. Buying silence. She stood then, slowly, fully. Not because Cross told her, because she chose it. So now you don't just have to take me, Clara said. You have to take Red Hollow's dignity too. Cross's eyes hardened. A long silence. Then he sighed, as if inconvenienced. Fine, he said. He nodded to one of his men. The man stepped forward and reached for Clara's arm. And in that instant, the world narrowed to the same choice that lived on the hay bale. A hand reaching, a boundary, a decision about what kind of people they were allowed to be. Jonah's voice came out low, dangerous. Don't. The man hesitated. Cross's smile turned thin. Do it. The man reached again. Clara's hand moved, fast, practiced, drawing the revolver from beneath her shawl. The barrel didn't point at Cross. It pointed at the man, reaching for her. Stop, Clara said. The word cracked across the street like a whip. The town froze. Cross stared at the gun, then at Clara, almost amused. You think you'll shoot? Cross asked. Clara's voice didn't tremble. I think you're going to learn what No, sounds like. Cross laughed softly. Jonah, he said, did you teach her that? Jonah didn't answer. He didn't need to. Cross's eyes shifted to the sheriff. You going to let her point a gun at my man? Cross asked. Sheriff Lott's mouth opened. No sound came out. And then, quiet as a knife sliding free, Mrs. Calder stepped forward. She held a shotgun. Not raised, just held. You said law, Mrs. Calder said. I've got law too. It's called Don't Touch What Isn't Yours. A murmur rose into something heavier. Agreement, anger, old grudges finding a spine. Another man stepped forward, the blacksmith, holding a hammer like it suddenly mattered. Then another, the store clerk, with a rifle. Red Hollow, the patient town that watched everything, began to choose. Cross's smile faltered for the first time. Not because he was afraid of one gun, because he could see the story changing in daylight. Cross lifted his hand slightly. Let's not be foolish. It's too late for that, Jonah said. You've been foolish your whole life. You just had money to hide it. Cross's eyes narrowed. You think this town will die for you? Cross asked Clara. I'm not asking them to die, Clara said calmly. I'm asking them to stop living on their knees. Silence. Then Cross's jaw tightened. His hand moved toward his coat. Jonah's rifle came up at the same moment, and Red Hollow held its breath as the day threatened to turn into blood.